Ms. Diamantopoulou, thank you again very, very much for having come to the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy again for the excellent lecture before. We'd like to take the opportunity now just to ask you a few follow-up questions based primarily on your lecture as well as the themes of the conference. First of all, I'd like to ask you about nation branding. Nation branding in many ways can be a very effective way of helping the way in which countries are perceived abroad and also presented abroad. What do you think nation branding can do to possibly supplement the perception of Greece abroad or complete the somewhat partial picture which very often is presented of Greece?
Particularly now, there is a problem with these negative stereotypes which rose during the crisis. And there is all this perception that these lazy Greeks, these bloody people who do not respect the law, etc., etc. Of course, this is not the case. There are many problems, but this is not the profile of a Greek person. So in that time, what it is important for the country, it is to bring in the first line and to make well known the nation's achievement in very concrete fields. For example, in innovation, in technology, in entrepreneurship, in literature, in painting, where you can find some of the most brilliant personalities in the world who are Greeks. So I think that now we have to focus not in our sun, in our beaches or in our Acropolis, but in our human capital, which is so important.
Okay, thank you very much. Tourism plays an important role in countries such as Greece and Spain. Do you think that sustainable tourism could be an opportunity to improve the economies in those countries, especially now in the crisis?
My first question could be yes. It's not very easy. You know, the sustainable tourism needs a lot of investment in the very first level. Now what we are trying to do since a few years ago, and because of the European Union has played a very important role on that because of the rules and the new regulations, etc. We have started a combination of classic tourism and sustainable tourism. What I believe is that now, for the next 3 years, we have to focus on both quantity and quality. We need very much quantity because there is a need of money and people to be in jobs. And of course, we must not forget quality, but I must be frank. Now, the first priority is quality and quantity.
That's clear.
I'd like to follow up on our earlier conversation about youth unemployment. Youth unemployment in Greece now, I think, is over 60%. We're also starting to see issues of brain drain, where actually some of the best minds and talents are now leaving Greece. What measures is the Greek government already doing to try to counter this, and what measures do you think could be taken?
The youth unemployment is about 50%. And it is true that there is a huge problem of brain drain. Until now, there were some policies in place. For example, there is the Greek government is subsidizing the postdoc positions in many universities and in many research centers. So there is, for this year, 2,500 new positions for postdocs. There are some programs which subsidize very qualified people in companies, so companies where research centers can hire people with this profile, but the numbers are not satisfied. So whatever we do, if there is no growth and if we continue just only with austerity, I'm afraid that we cannot stop this brain drain. So the answer is one, growth in order to create jobs.
You made an interesting comment earlier about also, in particular, the field of culture, which is really suffering, whether it's the artists, the writers, etc. What could be done, for example, to try to invigorate that section of the economy, which I think is usually hit first when a crisis comes, the cultural sector?
It is a very interesting and very sensitive issue, because usually in cases of crisis, we concentrate on concrete sectors, industry, engineers, lawyers, teachers, etc. And we do not focus on this very important issue of young people in the cultural sector. So there are young actors, artists, painters, authors, singers, musicians, so many young and talented and gifted people who really cannot have any opportunity, because when there are cuts, you cut from the orchestra, you cut from theater, you cut from galleries. It is the first cuts from a government. So I believe that it is important to develop some projects at the European and international level to support particularly these fields. Otherwise, in a few years, all these young people will leave or will be destroyed.
Okay. Next question is concerning women's rights. More and more women, such as you, are occupying leading role positions within the EU. How do you think cultural diplomacy could play a role in strengthen women's participation in leading positions within the EU?
It's an interesting question. I haven't thought it from this point of view, but the way that we perceive women's position is a cultural issue as well. So when we have prototypes, when we have women leaders in all areas, it's a change in our culture. It's a change in the way we see things. Just to give you an example. When Thatcher was Prime Minister for 13 years, in the 11th year, there was a competition in schools, and the question was, what do I want to be when I grow up? And 55% of girls answered, I want to be a Prime Minister, and only 10% of boys. So the cultural approach was totally different because a woman figure was there. So I believe that promoting women figure in media, in every public area, create followers, and it is very good for young girls.
Final question we'd like to ask is about cultural diplomacy. Has Greece implemented any cultural diplomacy activities or strategies since the crisis? And do you think that cultural diplomacy could assist in some of the anti-Greek sentiment that has come since the crisis?
Not particularly during the crisis, but there were many efforts between Greece and Turkey on cultural diplomacy. So there were many events in the cultural area, in the touristic area, in the peace proceedings. So since the situation and the atmosphere between the two countries were not easy for years, culture was always a very good way out to start the next step. We have an experience, I think Greece and Turkey have a nice experience on this issue.